Good evening. We will call the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. It is the meeting of August 3rd at 6 p.m. And welcome everyone. We would like to establish a quorum, please.
Good evening. Mr. Wathers?
I'm here.
Ms. Kirkner?
Here.
Mr. Lester?
Here.
Mr. Hoff?
Here.
Mr. Kane?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Klosik? Commissioner Wamp? Secretary Eisenberg?
Here.
Mr. Chair, please let the record reflect that 6 members are present and we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on our agenda is review and approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda that's been submitted to us?
No, the agenda is as submitted.
All right, Chair, be happy to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
I move we approve the agenda.
All right.
Second.
I think Janice seconded it, and Matt did too. So we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as submitted. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
All right. Sounds like that's unanimous. The agenda is approved. Move on to item 5, the administrative report. Madam Secretary, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here to our meeting on a very, very steamy Wednesday evening. I'm glad it's virtual and we're all inside. The only thing I want to bring to your attention, and I believe Laura Bavetta is sending this out to you all, but October 25th and 26th in Frederick, Maryland, is the 39th Annual Maryland Planning Commissioners Association Conference. If you have not attended in the past, it's a great conference. It's geared exactly to citizen planners such as yourselves as Planning Commission members. I'm not able to attend this year as Planning Commission Chair. I have a conflict, but I would encourage you, if you're interested in attending, please reach out. And Laura's going to send this out for you all to see it and read about it. I don't believe an agenda has been posted yet. And this year it will be in person. Last year we were supposed to go. At literally the last minute, they changed it to virtual, and it was supposed to be in Calvert County and Solomon's Island. So Ms. Kirkner was supposed to go with us last year, as well as Mr. Alman, our attorney. So hopefully you all will attend again. And if anyone else would like to attend, please let us know. It really is a great event for Planning Commission members. You get training. You just really get to see how other members, planning commissions across the state of Maryland, what they do and some of the challenges that they are also facing as a role of a citizen planner. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, and we'll get more information to you as well. And that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you very much. And it's in Frederick, so that's pretty convenient for us. We will move on to item 6, which is really the meat of our meeting tonight, the agriculture and conservation zoning text discussion and approval is how it's labeled for us. So I will turn the floor over for that discussion.
All right. Yep. So tonight is the last night of literally a 4-year comprehensive rezoning effort. 5 years. Oh my goodness. So as soon as the master plan was adopted, we started on this journey to update, modernize Carroll County zoning code, as well as parts of the subdivision regulation and different entities within the Carroll County Code of Law and Ordinances that pertain to zoning control. So with that, this recommendation that you'll make this evening is your final action as Planning Commission before forwarding to the Board of County Commissioners for them to consider the last 2 districts, the Agricultural District and the Conservation District. And I really want to thank you all for working with us through all of these changes over the years. our new members as well as our seasoned members that have been on this commission. I mean, Mr. Walters has seen it through the master plan. Ms. Kirkner came with the Freedom Plan and now seeing this to fruition. It really is a great feat. A lot of planning commissions don't get this far. A lot of times this is done by consultants. This was entirely done in-house, mostly Mary Lane did the yeoman's work, and I really could not have done this without her. She was phenomenal in all of this and ushering all of this legislation through, as well as the rest of our concept team members. Jay Voigt is here, as well as his staff that have helped participate. Development review with Laura Matthias, and past years Clay Black when he was here. So as well as support staff in the planning department. Such as Price Wagner, Abigail Rogers, Tiffany Fawcett, Claire Stewart, the whole group, Laura Bavetta, everyone we really joined together. So with that, I don't want to be long-winded. I want to pass it to Mary, and we have some items we brought back to you from last time, some questions and all that you had. So we'd like to clear those up. And our goal tonight is to get your approval of the recommended legislation that's before you so we can forward that to the Board of County Commissioners. Even without you forwarding it, because we can come back to another meeting, we are going to begin our first work session with the Board of County Commissioners tomorrow. The work session is from 1 to 3. And tomorrow really is going over with them all the different things that you've gone over, but they're not going to get into this legislation. So I just wanted to let you know that so you don't have total pressure. If there's something in here you're still not quite sure about, we can come back to another meeting. But if so, we'd like to forward this to the Board of County Commissioners tonight, but they're not going to get into the meat of this tomorrow. And we have 3 so far work sessions planned with them, August 4th, the 11th, and the 25th. They're taking a week break from having 2-hour work sessions with us because they will be at the Maryland Association of Counties Conference in Ocean City that they annually attend. So that's kind of the setup of where we are for this evening. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Mary.
Thank you. Good evening. Could the control room give me ability to share my screen? Thank you. Thanks. Okay. As Linda said, we're really excited to be hopefully wrapping this up tonight after this journey we've been on. There are a few things that you wanted to see again, and then there was just a small section regarding accessory uses and I believe bulk requirements that we didn't review for the first time. So we'll just start with anything highlighted. Hopefully you all received this about a week and a half ago. It includes all the changes that you have made over the past month and a half or so since we've been, actually a couple months since we've been reviewing this. Any other technical grammar problems we've identified. Again, it's not at its final stages because the Board of County Commissioners will have the final say in this. And those of you who followed it last time, we work with them as we did with you page by page, and they go over every single word. And I think that's why we end up with a good product at the end. So I'll just start by showing you what we did with agritourism. There was the discussion last time that it should more accurately reflect the state definition. So we added back in, which is in the state definition, camping and incidental stays. But pursuant to our conversation, we also added, provided they're limited to no more than 1 campsite. And if you'll recall, the logic behind that was more than 1 campsite, excuse me, is considered commercial camping. And that is a conditional use in the agricultural zone. Agritourism would be a permitted use. So without that caveat there that it can only be 1 campsite, it would take away it being a conditional use with the different requirements that we went over last time. So hopefully you think this accurately reflects what we talked about several weeks ago. And if anybody, if anyone has any comments, let me know. Otherwise, I'll keep moving through.
I think that's consistent with what we talked about. At least I think so, unless anybody disagrees. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 3 of the draft, you'll see also highlighted, we talked about currently food processing and packing plants, I think kind of strangely are allowed in the agricultural district. We've differentiated what is an industrial use, which is food processing and packing, with this definition, the second definition. And then we also added something that is really more geared towards what goes on in the agricultural district. So it's an operation related to a farm that manufactures, packages, labels, and or stores any type of food. So if you're wondering, I kind of found these definitions in different places and tried to make them accurately reflect what I thought we had discussed. So is there any comment or suggestion regarding that? Okay, if there's not, I'm going to jump right to where we left off last time, which is accessory uses, which is on, if you're following on your hard copy, that's on page 30. And also, just so you know, this new information was put on our county website, on our webpage regarding this. So citizens do have, and anyone else who's interested, do have access to the latest draft of this, as well as I believe there's a summary of the proposed changes on there, and also a timeline. And I think it really provides anyone who is interested in this effort with pretty complete information, and we'll be updating it as we work through the commissioners' work sessions.
Mary, I have one question on our use table, and I
Mhm.
kind of talked to Linda a little bit about this afternoon. We have agritourism in the conservation zoning district as a conditional use. I have some hesitations about that. If you have a farm and a conservation use, you're going to have to go before the board to get approval to have a pick your own, or any other farm in the county could do some type of activity of that nature. But if you're in the conservation zoning district, you're going to have to go before the board to do that. I really think we need to change that to a principal use in the conservation zone.
Okay, just to give you the background of that, that was something that came through the concept team. I believe the director of land and resource management felt that that should be a conditional use, and for reasons I think he articulated, that there is a difference between the conservation and the agricultural district as far as the preservation of natural resources, et cetera, that it deserved the scrutiny of a conditional use. It's certainly, I hear what you're saying, it's reasonable. So I would just open it up and ask the members, the planning commission members, what they would like to do with that.
And that's basically, I just want to make sure that if we do it that way, that we can say that's what everybody agreed on. But I could see some issues with that coming up in the future, possibly.
Jay, can you maybe give a little more detail about the concerns that you have around that in terms of what you're
Basically, if we make it a conditional use, any of the activities in the definition of agritourism, if you're a farm and you want to do any of those, then before you can do them, you're going to have to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals and get approval for it. Whereas the same size farm or in the ag zoning district, you don't have to. It's a principal use. Agritourism is supposed to promote agricultural uses, and there are a lot of agricultural use properties in the conservation zoning districts. I'm just concerned that we're putting a burden on one group of farmers and not the other, and kind of making it more difficult for them to do traditional farming activities. I mean, a pick your own pumpkin patch, corn maze. I mean, they're kind of traditional farming activities if you have a farm in the conservation zoning district. If it's conditional use, before you can do that, you go to the board. Whereas if you're in the ag, you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything unintended wise from when we apply for tourism on a farm like that, agritourism? Is there any sort of consequence, traffic wise, runoff wise, that would endanger the company that we're trying to protect? I'm thinking through it, and I can't think of a reason not to do what you're saying. I mean, can you think of any reason why we wouldn't permit?
I'm not saying these are reasons why you wouldn't, but there's always parking issues or, activity of more people in a certain area. but you're going to have that the same set of circumstances on an ag property as you are on conservation. And the whole thing of agritourism was to make it easier on farmers to do things, to produce additional income. And by making it a conditional use, you're putting a roadblock up, if you want to say, that they have to take the extra step.
I think it comes down to property rights. I think somebody in the conservation district would look at it like that. You know, you're taking away their right when somebody else automatically gets it. You know, I tend to feel like it should not be a conditional use.
This is Jeff. I'm looking back at the definition of agritourism. Obviously, we have it in front of us, but an activity conducted on a farm that is offered to a member of the general public or to invited guests for the purposes of education, recreation, or active involvement in the farm operation. And then it goes on to talk about these activities shall be conducted in conjunction with principal agricultural production or processing. I think I'm kind of building on what Janice said a minute ago. I mean, I feel like that doesn't seem like a stretch to me, given that we have sort of these channel markers here in terms of what can be done, and it's very much agriculturally centered. I do have some hesitation, and Jay, I appreciate you pointing that out, in basically taking away the right of a farmer in the conservation district to do some things that are agriculturally based and have to come to us, the government, to get permission to do it.
And one other thing to look at, I know that the idea of conservation zoning district is conservation, and I fully agree with that. But if you're going to be doing agritourism, it says on a farm operation, so you're going to have a farm to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to have somebody who has 4 or 5 acres of land and they want to do a corn maze. It's not a farming operation. It's just a commercial enterprise that way. So, there are, I think, some things in that definition that restricts it to a property that is in conservation, that is an agriculturally operated property. It's being actively farmed by somebody.
Any other thoughts or comments?
This is Matt. I would just say I'm kind of split on it because there is a difference between conservation and agriculture, and put a little bit more scrutiny on the conservation. But of course, if it makes sense, I don't think they're going to have any issue with allowing it either if it's conditional use. I mean, it is another step, but I don't think it's that much because it is a conservation zone as according to an ag zone. So.
Like I said, I just want to make sure that we understand, what we're doing with that. Like I say, and we are putting one more step that they have to go through that nobody else has to.
Jay, I'll say it. I appreciate you bringing it up because I think with as many of these conditional uses that we can eliminate, the stronger or the more certainty we give everyone. There's less opportunity for us to be sized as being arbitrary, in our application of the code. At the same time, I actually, from a property rights standpoint, it is. I'm kind of where Matt is on this. It's conservation. I mean, they knew it when they bought it. There should be additional restrictions on that because there's a reason it's conservation. We designated it that way for a reason. It's to a tributary. We're concerned about certain types of runoff. So again, I don't feel that strongly about this, and so the fact that we've taken this much time, guys. But I do think that if somebody is on, there's a difference between something being agricultural and then something being conservation, and it's restrictions on it makes some sense to me. At the same time, I don't like. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I'm looking for somebody to talk to me. Yes.
Well, I am too, because I do agree that yes, conservation is conservation, and we have to be more protective of it. I'm just thinking from an enforcement standpoint, and that's really basically where I'm coming from. It would cause less headache for me if it was a principal use, but I have, just to let you know, I have no problem whatsoever enforcing it if it's a conditional use. If that's what everybody wants to do and that's what gets passed, you'll have my backing 100% from an enforcement standpoint. It's just something I want to make sure that that's what we want to do.
So I have a little heartburn with the theory that I understand it's conservation, but if we allow them to farm on conservation land, which certainly we do, I don't see the difference in them doing this and educating the public. It's not like they have a whole herd of people coming. It's limited. So I still go back to property rights, and a good attorney would probably come back around and say, why are you doing this? It's limiting here. And somebody else can automatically do it just because they're agricultural.
Yeah, I tend to lean. Look, I think it's a tough call. The question, I guess, in my mind, where I weigh this is, if we are to make agritourism a principal permitted use in the conservation district, is it consistent with the spirit of the conservation district, generally speaking? And as Janice just said, we permit, sometimes even encourage farming operations in the conservation district. So allowing agritourism there doesn't seem to be, generally speaking, inconsistent with that notion, particularly since we define it in a way that it's centrally focused on farming operations and education about agriculture, which I think is something we want to encourage. And then secondly, what Pete was saying, I take the same arguments, but I kind of lean the other way, which is I think where we can avoid having a conditional use, I think it tends to make things more predictable and certain, and we get less sort of arbitrary or what could be perceived as arbitrary decisions under similar circumstances, where one farming operation in the conservation district is permitted to do things that are more agritourism in nature and his neighbor isn't, because they got a different zoning officer or Board of Zoning Appeals officer. All well-intentioned, inconsistent. So I think providing guidance around something that has pretty good guardrails and is focused on agriculture and agricultural activities and education of that, to me is very much consistent with the conservation district sort of writ large. I don't see it as really a stretch. Is there a potential for abuse where somebody's doing something radical under the umbrella of agritourism in a conservation district? Not much, I don't think. I think our definition is pretty clear, pretty good. So we don't have to agree with me, but I come down and I say I'm pretty comfortable with this, and it seems to be a place where I'm comfortable getting rid of a conditional use.
Yeah,
here.
I say again, I think as many conditional uses as we can get rid of, the stronger our code is. I agree with that statement. So I'm not against you there.
Michael, do you feel strongly one way or the other?
Definition, we're not hung up on definitions, and certainly there's farming and conservation areas. Why? Who knows? I mean, you're not going to farm, the conservation, I was looking through that definition, and it's because of natural geographic features and existing, you're not going to farm on the side of a rock. So I think there's some boundaries there. And I do think that the definition that we're agreeing to, I think, with on agritourism sets guardrails in itself as well. So I'm fine with dropping that conservation making it the same as agriculture.
So you'd be okay with it being a principal permitted use in the
Yes.
conservation district?
Yeah.
Okay. And Stephen, do you have any thoughts one way or the other?
No, I mean, I agree with what just Michael just said. You know, I think we have enough in place as far as guardrails and everything else go that we can, I think we're steering everything in the right direction. So I agree that we can move forward. I think everybody's kind of on the same page.
Okay, thank you. And Matt, you were sort of on the fence. No pun intended, since we're talking about farms here, but are you
Yeah.
leaning that direction?
I'm not pro or negative either. You know, either way. I mean, you know, I'm not going to fall on my sword on it. That's for sure. So.
Okay. Well, I think we can take that as a consensus, unless since Matt's not falling on swords this afternoon on that. So, Jay, thank you for raising that. I appreciate it. That's a really good point and good discussion around that.
Thank you all.
And can I just give everyone a reminder, please turn your microphones off when you're not speaking. We're getting a lot of feedback in the discussion here. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, so I will make that change to a permitted use rather than conditional, and I will make sure that when we discuss that specific use with the Board of County Commissioners, we bring to their attention the discussion that was had, as we've noted all those that we've had considerable discussion on, so that they know particular concern to you and what got your attention. So I will make that change. The next thing that's highlighted, and this is something you've already decided, but I just wanted to put in here, you had agreed to, about half an hour ago, this definition of food processing and packing of agricultural products, and that would be a permitted use in the ag zone. I just wanted to make sure that was okay with everyone. Okay. So now we're really getting to what we had left off at last time, and it's the accessory uses. And just as a reminder, the accessory uses used to be located within each zoning category. There was a separate one under agricultural, a separate one under conservation, as there was before we made the changes to commercial and industrial and residential. So this way we've tried to consolidate them and use the common language for all of them so that there's not confusion. So I'm going to go through these. I will only point out, unless anyone has questions, things that changed when they made the transition to the old format, from the old format to this new format. And there's some not considerable, but there are some changes that we worked on. There's probably as much attention that went into the accessory uses in this particular zoning category as there were the principal permitted uses, or the principal uses rather. So first, number one is a catch-all, basically saying that accessory buildings and uses that are customarily incidental to any principal permitted. We added non-conforming use to all of the categories because it was brought to our attention that you can have accessory uses in buildings in non-conforming uses. So we thought it was wise to add that, since it was really eliminated between principal permitted or authorized conditional use, including mobile homes subject to the applicable provisions of 150. And again, with the exception of non-conforming use, that is existing language. That's the catch-all. If you don't, it would be up to the zoning administrator to determine what is customarily incidental, and it's also defined earlier in the code. So that is, if you don't see it below, that doesn't mean that it's not an acceptable or an appropriate accessory use or building in the district. So the second thing is home occupation, and this is currently allowed in, well, pretty much all of the zones, that the residential as well as the ag and the conservation. What's new here is A through D. That is language that was added by the county commissioners, as well as I believe you recommended it in the last round when we did the residential zone. We thought it was smart to also include this in the agricultural zone. These specific requirements were not there before, but this does reflect what's in the residential zone accessory use section. Another thing that has changed is, and the commissioners had a lot of discussion about this, private stables, if you'll recall last time, and they talked about how much area for each animal unit, and we have animal units defined. Again, this carries through to what they did from the residential districts. So that would be number 4, A through D is all reflecting what is also in the residential zone. Storage modules. Currently, storage modules are allowed, but what we have recommended as new is that on properties of 10 acres or less, there shall be no more than 1 storage module located on the property, and on property greater than 10 acres, there should be no more than 1 storage module for each additional 10 acres. And I don't know if Jay wants to expand on that, but I think it's a problem that he's seen where there can be a proliferation on smaller properties. So this puts some kind of limit based on the acreage that you're dealing with. B, however, is currently existing. B 1 through 4, those are current requirements. So does anyone have any, do you want further explanation of the new requirement under A? Okay, I'm going to keep moving. Family daycare is a little bit different. Instead of having to have a hearing, this also was in the residential districts. We're trying to be consistent. They only have to submit a signed affidavit stating that the use meets all applicable Maryland state requirements. Again, there was a lot of discussion in the residential districts on this, and we carried it forward. Okay, this next section is what you discussed. I believe it was at your June 1st work session, but now you see it in a more of a legislative form. So I'm going to go over it line by line. So as you'll recall, we talked about the differences between attached accessory and detached accessory. The main difference being currently detached accessory dwellings require subdivision rights. You have to have the ability to subdivide your property to have one. In exchange for that, there are no size or bedroom limitations on it currently. So this new language, A through G, applies to all accessory dwelling units, although there is one typo in C that I'll point out. So first, an accessory dwelling must have direct access from the outside. That's current language, applies to both. The property owner must occupy either the principal dwelling unit or the accessory dwelling unit on the property. Again, that's current. This C is new for detached. The maximum size of an accessory dwelling shall not be more than 1,000 square feet of livable floor area, and no administrative adjustment or variance is allowed to this provision. And you will recall you did have quite a lively discussion on this. That is new language for the detached. Currently, the code allows, I believe, 800 and a percentage of floor area, but you agreed that 1,000 square feet for both probably made sense. Both attached and detached have to have no more than 2 bedrooms. That's, again, new for the detached. The accessory dwelling unit must meet all applicable building construction and Maryland Department of Health and Mental Hygiene and MDE regulations. 1 additional off-street parking space must be provided for each bedroom in the accessory dwelling unit. Only one accessory dwelling unit, either attached or detached, but not both, shall be permitted on a single lot. And then H only applies to detached. Detached accessory dwelling units shall be located on lots at least 3 acres in size and may not be located more than 50 feet from the principal dwelling. And that last part was really to address the concern that somebody was going to build something that would be used not really for an accessory dwelling, but for another, rental unit that would be completely separate. If it can't be more than 50 feet from the house.
Mary, sorry to interrupt. Can you scroll down a little? There you go.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so again, H, let me get H on the screen. H only applies to the detached and its new language. again, the 3 acres, you'll recall the discussion we had that it's basically a septic issue because that's what would be required for its septic requirements. So I believe that's everything that you had talked about and tentatively agreed to. I don't know if you want to have further discussion on this. Again, it will be going. I'm sure the commissioners will have a discussion about this in particular.
So Mary, this is Jeff. I did want to revisit C8C, where it says no administrative adjustment or variance is allowed to this provision. I'm rethinking that for a couple of reasons. I think I might have been the one who was in favor of that. So I'm free to be whimsical and change my mind, which I might be doing. We got some feedback from members of the public on this, and one was Ms. Swisher, who was talking about. Let me move this so I can read what she said. She said, of concern is consideration of the 1,000 square feet size restriction without variances for a detached ADU. My husband has recently transitioned to a power wheelchair, which is much bulkier and requires a greater turning radius and space around furniture than his manual wheelchair. For example, according to the ADA, bedrooms should have enough room for a bed with an additional 5 feet by 5 feet of room to allow for comfortable maneuverability from a wheelchair. I've searched several floor plan websites for wheelchair accessible apartments in small houses and have not been able to find any 2-bedroom, 1-bath plans for 1,000 square feet or less. A second smaller bedroom is reasonably needed for office space guests or future caregivers. I ask you please consider allowing size variances to meet reasonable ADA compliance. So I wanted to bring that to us because that's a pretty compelling argument, I think, where, people under certain circumstances, particularly involving ADA issues, may need to seek a variance for reasons having to do with those things, those accommodations. And I was an advocate for saying no variances, but I think in light of those kinds of concerns, and I think we got others as well, but that one stuck out to me. I'm interested in striking out the language that says no administrative adjustment or variance is allowed to this provision.
Yeah, and I know the Swishers, and I also know that Dan is very adamant about wanting to maintain his ability to do things on his own. So it's very important to him to be able to move about and get around. We also got something from Marty Hackett. We received that this afternoon, and he makes some very compelling arguments about the 1,000 square feet. And he also says that, I believe it's what he said, there, along with the 50 feet of the principal structure, I don't agree with, wouldn't allow for the detached accessory dwelling to be separated because that's not what it's designed to be. However, I thought he indicated somewhere in this that the accessory dwellings in other counties don't have as restrictive a code for the size. And of course, he also enumerates that the health department is going to guide what can and can't be done. So there's definitely some protections there. I'm still, as I did before, struggling with that 1,000 square feet. I don't think that's honestly a hard, fast rule we should have, because I do think septic and well will play a role in that. So,
Mr. Chairman, can I say something on that, please? Just a
Yes, please.
reminder, in the agricultural zoning district, you are allowed to have a two-family dwelling unit, full two-family dwelling unit, with unlimited size on either dwelling unit. But they're two full-size, considered separate dwelling units. The thing about what the accessory dwelling was, at least I think we were trying to do, is to make sure that they remain as accessory to that principal dwelling. And as for the distance, currently right now, to have a detached accessory dwelling unit, you have to have subdivision rights. By saying it this way, and I'm not saying this has to be exact wording on it and everything, but by doing this, we're allowing detached accessory dwelling units on properties that are not subdividable. So there are a couple other options when people are looking at this. If you have a single family dwelling on your property and you want to add a full second dwelling unit for somebody, to your son, your in-laws, whatever, you can build in the ag zoning district a full second house as a 2-family dwelling unit. Now they're attached to each other, but they're both considered completely separate dwelling units with their own well and their own septic systems as a 2-family dwelling unit. So I just wanted to bring that up to remind you that there are other options for detached accessory dwelling units in the ag zoning district as we are proposing. This is just in the 50 feet, or whatever. I mean, this was to kind of set it and say, yeah, these are accessory dwelling units to the main unit. They're not a second full house. I know as for area, no administrative adjustment or variance is allowed. That's something that we can deal with if we remove it. It's not a big issue. It's just a matter of having to go through a hearing. But like I say, there was a reason we were trying to limit it to an accessory dwelling unit on the property. And like I say, I just want to remind you of that other possibility on a property.
Jay, let me just ask a clarifying question, because sometimes I get confused about this. The language that we have in the code before us doesn't require that the land be subdividable, right? This says this is an accessory dwelling unit, and it's silent on whether you have subdivision rights or not.
Right. With what we are proposing here, you do not have to have subdividable property. Have a detached accessory dwelling unit.
Right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It does require that. And that's one of the things we are trying to address with this, is that to allow people to have a detached accessory dwelling unit on their property that's not attached to the house or anything, and not have to subdivide their property. But we wanted to make sure that it remained as accessory to the main unit of the property.
And so if you do have subdividable land, subdivision rights, you can always subdivide and build a second dwelling unit without any restrictions, at least as they relate to accessory dwelling units. That's still possible, right?
Yes, I'm currently, and even with this code that we're proposing, if your property is subdividable, you could build a new dwelling on it and it'll be a whole separate dwelling. It'd just be on a separate lot. It won't be on the same lot.
Right. This
is requiring the detached accessory dwelling unit to be on the same lot as the principal unit. It keeps it, in my opinion, it keeps it as accessory to the property. And one of the other things in this with the accessory dwelling units, we get quite a few calls on this. There's a requirement in there that the property owner has to live in one of the 2 units. Unlike if you had 2-family dwelling, you can rent both 2-family dwellings out and not live there. But with these requirements, the owner has to live in one of those 2 units. It doesn't matter which unit, just one of those 2 units has to be the residence of the owner.
And so the code, just to kind of finish this up, and then I'll certainly open it up. The code, as we're proposing it, really expands the right for citizens to have accessory dwelling units beyond what they had prior to this amendment, because now they can have an accessory dwelling unit, a detached accessory dwelling unit on land that is not subdividable. It's just that if they do this, this new right is limited in the sense that it right now is limited in size and so forth, right?
Correct.
And we also had a provision, I think, before we talked about making it 1,000 square feet of livable floor area or 1/3 of the total livable floor area of the principal floor area, whichever is greater. And I know that that had been stricken out, but I kind of throw that out. Has anybody thought about that anymore? And do they want to consider having that language put back in?
Well, the way that section of the code currently reads is the maximum square footage is 800 square feet or 1/3 of the livable floor area of the existing house. What we're currently proposing, it says 1,000 square feet, which is increasing the amount of room in the house. And we're not giving them that option of, a 4,000 square foot house, and a 1,200 square foot accessory dwelling. When you get down to it, that's a lot of the same size as a lot of single family dwelling units already.
Yeah, and if we're going to allow a possible variance, perhaps those issues could be addressed when the variance is sought.
That's true. It can be, and there can be. I know Ms. Swisher has concerns with ADA. That could be a reason to allow a variance or an adjustment to that square footage. That it could fall under unreasonable hardship or practical difficulty, which is something you have to look at. So if you do take the administrative adjustment out, you can apply for that variance, but generally we're saying 1,000 square feet. And that, you have to remember, that's livable floor area. That livable floor area does not include things like garages, hallways, those type of items. So it's bigger. 1,000 square foot of livable floor area is in reality a little bit bigger than 1,000 square feet for a house.
What would you think that 1,000 square feet would equate to? 1,400 overall, or?
Well, I don't know how it would equate to something, but I know in my experience, my house is only 1,100 square feet right now. It has 3 bedrooms and a bath and a half. If it was limited to 2 bedrooms, you'd still have area where you can expand for accessibility issues. That may not be enough, so if we allow a variance, that's fine. But like I say, 1,000 square foot. I mean, that's like I say, you're starting to get into the square foot area of what a single family dwelling is.
Is it possible to add, because I don't think the average person, when you talk about livable floor area, is thinking that that's just the rooms that you're actually living in, and eliminating the hallways and garages and anything else. Is it possible to expand that a little bit and say, does not include hallway, warm-up, etc.?
It would be possible.
A little more understandable for them.
Well, we've got that in the definition now on page 3.
On page 3, there is a definition of what livable floor area consists of.
Yeah, but then you got to go back and forth. So, or see page 3, something that would make people think, oh yeah, there is more square footage available here, and I see what they're talking about.
One thing that's done frequently in statutory construction and in drafting is that defined terms are either bolded or something like that. Will that be done in this case? Because I think that would get to Janice's point. If livable floor area was bolded or indicated that it's a defined term, they would know to, there's something more there to check it out.
It
Yeah,
wouldn't
I've
hurt
seen
to
that. Go ahead, Jay.
I don't think it would hurt to put after where it says livable floor area, see definition of livable floor area. That certainly won't hurt anything, and that will direct them to what the definition is and what is and isn't livable floor area. So they would get an idea of what that would be.
Yeah, we could say as defined in 158.002. The problem with bolding it is, and that's a great idea, I've seen that a lot too, we'd have to go through the whole code so that that's what was indicated. That might be a, Jim, you might want to
Bridge too far. Yeah. Okay.
It's a lot right now. Maybe next time they redo the code, we could do that.
Yeah.
But I think we could say as referenced in or as defined in 158.002 so that it's clear.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of a bit simple, the kiss, but I won't go with the other ending. So.
Other comments?
Did the agricultural committee or the citizens committee on this section of the text have any concerns or did they have any voice any concerns about limiting the size this way, the 1,000 feet?
This was one of the areas where there was no consensus. It was pretty evenly split. There was a number of people who didn't even want to open this up to non-subdividable land. So we really didn't get into too many of the details. We agreed after discussing it probably at 3 meetings, Linda could correct me if I'm wrong, that we would just bring it to you with both options. And that's why we had those early discussions with you in May and June, because there just wasn't consensus. So as I recall, we really didn't discuss the square footage and expanding it or changing it or anything. Linda, am I remembering correctly?
No, that's exactly right, Mary. The work group was very split with even allowing accessory dwelling units detached on non-subdividable properties. So that's why when we came to, we were presenting both for you all to make a recommendation to the board moving forward. So as far as size goes, like Mary said, we didn't even get into that detail.
Yeah, most of the comments I heard, there was most of the agricultural people in the committee were against the detached. There was one person that was kind of for it, and maybe 2 that were kind of didn't really go either way. So, but I don't think there was any much concern over the square footage because they got hung up on the attached to detached.
And maybe I'm confusing this with other language, but wasn't there a acreage requirement for detached? Was it a minimum of 3 acres? I seem to remember somewhere.
That's in H, halfway down the page. Yeah, that's in H. Detached accessory dwelling unit shall be located on lots at least 3 acres in size. And I think you're recalling the lengthy discussion we have had regarding the necessity of that for septic purposes. So that's where that 3 acres came from.
I swear I wasn't reading ahead. Yeah, thank you.
So are we okay with the language here, except getting rid of, in letter C, striking out the last sentence about no administrative adjustment or variance is allowed to this provision?
And referencing 158.002 for livable floor area?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me ask it this way. Is anyone opposed to making that change? Okay. Well, then it sounds like we have a consensus on that, Mary.
Okay, I'll make those changes before we give it to the commissioners tomorrow. Okay, then we're just going to move on. That was really most of the changes on accessory uses, but I do need to bring a few other things to your attention. And we also do have to get to the small text amendment on chapter 155. That's pretty much a cleanup one, but you really have to look at it so you can refer it. So really the next change is regarding the beauty parlors and barbershops. And the only thing different about that is, again, we've gone to, for certain uses that don't have a great impact, going to a signed affidavit rather than a public hearing on some of these uses. And in this case, we are recommending that that only be the case if it's conducted by a single practitioner. So if somebody's basically running this business out of their house, but they have nobody else in their family, it's just one chair, then they could just sign an affidavit to the zoning administrator saying that they'd be complying with all the requirements of this. And again, this was part of what we did in the residential to try to simplify things and cut down on the number of hearings without cutting the public out of things. You know, we tried to be reasonable with that. Okay, the next changes, everything else really, as you see, dance studios, roadside stands, cottage industries, those are what's elsewhere in the code that have just been relocated. Number 15 on page 33, lawn care and maintenance service, that is currently required in there. But what we are specifying, or what we are recommending be specified, is provided there are no more than 2 vehicles, 2 trailers, and 4 employees, including the owner of the business. And this keeps it to being an accessory use. This keeps it from being a full-blown business that would then need to either, depending on what it would be classified, either be in the appropriate zone or get a conditional use for being in the ag zone as a business. So that's what we felt was reasonable, and Jay had a lot of input into that, to what really constitute this being an accessory use. Nothing else here has changed until, again, number 18, the production of firewood, humus, wood chips, or mulch as an accessory use to the farming or residential parcels for land clearing or private use purposes. And then there's distance requirements listed in 158.040. And this requirement is new, that no wood may be piled over 6 feet, and no variance to these requirements may be granted. And this has been, both Jim and Jay can speak to this, an ongoing issue with the Board of Zoning Appeals. They really needed some clarity on what's considered accessory, what's considered, we talked about it, the commercial sawmill issue. So we feel like this is the final piece in that shows when it would be just accessory to a farm for that purpose. Does anybody have any questions about that change? Okay, number 19 is existing language. And then number 20 is what we talked about, I believe, at the last meeting. Livestock incineration in the agricultural district, provided the incineration is only of animals raised on the property, and that's except in extenuating circumstances. So we discussed that last time, and that's where it's been placed in this accessory use list. If there's no questions on the accessory uses, I'll move on to the next section, which is bulk requirements. And
Mary, just one quick question. For the extenuating circumstances, if an owner believes they have extenuating circumstances, they file it with the Board of Zoning Appeals? Is that how that would work?
I believe they would go to the zoning administrator, because
Go to Jay first. Okay.
Use. I think it's appealable to the BZA in that case.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct, Jay?
That's correct. It would be appealable to, my decisions are appealable to the BZA.
Okay. The next section, which is bulk requirements. Again, bulk requirements are defined in the code, and they're the lot area, the lot width, height, yards. There's a separate section for residential. There's a separate section for commercial and industrial. And then this is the separate section for ag. And there will be a separate section for conservation on the next page. We reviewed these. We looked at variances. We looked at the need to change these. We did not find any problems with these. There's not an excessive amount of variances requested. They're considered reasonable. The only change we did recommend is for the schools, elementary, middle, and high. They were very low before. I believe they were only like 5 acres. This 15 acres for elementary, 20 acres for middle, and 40 acres for high come from the state requirements for public schools. So that was the logic in changing it for schools. And I think that would also help. You had a lengthy discussion, I think at the last meeting, about the appropriateness of private schools on ag and conservation land. And this would provide further guardrails, as you were saying, to those conditional uses, because we have increased the acreages and they're in line with the public school requirements. Does anyone have any comments on that? And again, everything else that you see here is in the existing code. We didn't, other than the schools, we made no recommended changes to this. We saw no need to do that. So if you don't have questions, that completes, you've now reviewed, other than a few technical sections that I didn't go over that were just cleanup sections that needed to be done when we made new definitions and things like that. Do you have any questions regarding the draft that was sent out? I guess it's 52 pages. This will be cleaning up before tomorrow with the few changes you made today, and presenting this to the commissioners tomorrow.
I don't have any. Does anybody else have any additional questions or comments?
I'm good.
All right.
One question, I guess. I know this has come up from proposals before us about emergency response, fire. Peter, I think, raised it several meetings ago about the roads, accessibility for the equipment, turnarounds, things like that. It sounded particular to flag lots and residential areas like that. Is there anything in here that addresses that discussion that we've had before?
There's nothing in here because this is chapter 158 is zoning, and what you're discussing is in the I believe some of it's in chapter 155, and I'm not sure, but I believe Land and Resource Management might have addressed some of that when they had their text amendment. But no, we are not. I guess the short answer is we are not addressing any of those development issues with this. This is strictly zoning, other than I'm about to pull up a bill that's going to make me a liar for chapter 155, but that's really a cleanup to make chapter 155 match up to 158.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
So the very last.
Hold on, Mary, before we move on, I think it would be appropriate to take a vote on 158 and then move on to the 155 if everyone's okay with that. I would like to have an official vote from this planning commission on what we've shown you and that you are prepared to forward that to the Board of County Commissioners as proposed with the minor changes.
Okay. I think given the fact that we seem to have come to the end of our very lengthy discussion on this, that would be appropriate. So would one of you be comfortable making a motion as indicated by Linda?
I'll take a stab. I move that we approve chapter 158 with the minor changes.
Hold on, Janice, I cannot hear you. Steve, can you please mute? We can hear background noise. I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that, Janice? I could not hear one word you were saying.
Okay.
Thank
I
you. I'm
make a
sorry.
motion that we approve chapter 158 with the minor changes that were done this evening and forward that to the commissioners for their review and approval.
All right, so we have a motion by Ms. Kirkner to approve Chapter 158 with minor corrections, to forward that to the county commissioners for their review and approval. And we have Mr. Lester seconding that motion. Is there any further discussion? All right, I guess given the gravity of this, maybe we should do a roll call vote.
Yes, that's what I was going to suggest. Thank you so much for reading my mind. Mr. Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Kirkner,
Yes.
Mr. Lester,
Yes.
Mr. Kane,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Please let the record reflect that 5 are in favor and the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, you know what? Let's just pause here for a moment. I wanted to just convey my thanks as well to the staff everyone who's worked so long and hard on this, because before we just jump on over to 155 to do some of the cleanup stuff, I think it's worth pausing to kind of echo or maybe amplify what Linda said at the beginning of this. So, and Mary, you're the one, not only have you done great work on this, but I have to say, this could be incredibly dense, opaque kind of stuff. And you've walked us through it in ways that are very understandable. You've taken complicated things and made them really as simple as you can for lay people like us. And I don't think this process could have worked without your skill in those both hard skills and soft skills. So I just want to thank you for making our life easier on a task that's really, really huge, plus doing all the work that you've done substantively on this. So just thank you for that.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's nice to hear.
Well, you're very welcome. It's well deserved. And Linda and the staff team, Jay, Laura, Clay, I mean, Clay, who obviously did the work early on, now has since retired, but it's just really been a Herculean effort. This is why we only review it apparently every, 60 years or so.
I won't be around for the next one.
Yeah, I won't either. I'm off in a year. But, so anyway, thank you all. Thank you all very, very much. The county is, the community is better for this. It's not perfect. It never will be, but it's better. And
Thank you for saying that, Jeff. I will tell you, it has cost other jurisdictions hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars from professional consultants to do what we've done. And you know what? Hasn't really taken them any shorter amount of time.
True.
No, can't imagine they could do it any better, honestly. You live here, you live this, you know it. Jay is in this stuff every day. I can't imagine anybody knows it better than Mary. No consultant's going to come in and be able to do that. I don't care who they are. And just because they're from out of town doesn't make them smarter or better, which is what normally you think of with consultants. So just really, really well done. Something to be proud of. Really, really is. So really good work. So thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to get through the last 3 pages of this. So this is chapter 155. And again, this is the subdivision chapter that Land and Resource Management is making a number of changes to now that have come through you. But these are really just the ones that we felt were necessary regarding the ag and conservation, and they're mostly technical. The first one, attached accessory dwelling, this is simply to make this identical to what we just changed the definition to in chapter 158. So if you liked it in 158, you should like it here. Then there was a few sections that reference sections that have since gone away. So as you see, there's no more 158.070F. So that had to be changed. Again, under C, that's the same kind of thing. It was referencing a section that will go away. The only thing that I wanted to bring to your attention that's a little bit more than technical, but not really, is this is regarding the requirement for cluster subdivisions. There used to be a requirement in the residential districts that a conventional plan would have to be submitted and reviewed, and it was very time consuming and costly. And last December, the Board of Commissioners did agree that that should go away, and it's basically a formula on which to calculate what the density is. So the language here under number 2 reflects what was agreed to in the residential districts, and there's really no difference between a cluster in the residential and the conservation. So it's recommended that this language be identical to the residential and read: the total number of lots and dwelling units shall not exceed the number that would be permitted for the zoning district based on the gross area of the parcel or tract. And again, this means that when you cluster, you can't exceed the this is only in the conservation. There is no clustering in the ag, but you can't exceed the allowable density in the conservation district without having to show a plan that you've done that. It's basically a formula. And again, it was what was agreed to last year, so this carries it into the conservation district. And that is those are the only changes we're making to chapter 155. It's basically a companion piece to make sure that the whole thing fits together.
Any questions for Mary? Looks like none.
I do have just one.
Yeah, Jens.
Not that it is relevant, but you said there's none in agricultural, but years back, I kind of recall that you did kind of cluster them. For agricultural, you would or could take, like, you have a 25-acre parcel and you do 5 lots and they each get 5 1-acre lots. So is that still permissible?
That is still permissible. It's not considered clustering, and I'm the total wrong person to be answering that. Laura Matthias and her staff would, but it's not considered clustering. But yes, you're correct. It's
Okay.
they're allowed.
It's our rural subdivision standards. I'm sorry, Mary, I mean to
Yeah,
interrupt.
go ahead.
Genius, that's found under our rural subdivision standards. So you're correct, but as Mary said, it's not considered the same as clustering. And I don't know if you want to elaborate any more on that.
Does that answer your question, Jens? Okay. Any other questions for Mary on this chapter 155 that's in front of us? All right. I suppose then that you would like a similar motion, that this be approved and submitted to the commissioners for their review and approval.
That
You're
is
taking
correct. It'll be the same thing.
Okay, very good. So is there an interest in making a similar motion here as to 155?
Sure, I move we approve. I make a motion that we approve chapter 155 on the development and subdivision of land, and we submit that as proposed tonight and move it on up to the Board of County Commissioners.
I second.
Very good. Well, we have a motion by Mr. Lester that we approve chapter 155 development subdivision of land as submitted to us and submit it to the Board of County Commissioners for their approval. And Ms. Kirkner has seconded that motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we should probably proceed with a roll call vote on that as well.
Okay. Mr. Hoff?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Kirkner?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Mr. Kane?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Please let the record reflect that 5 are in favor and the motion carries.
Thank you. Is there any further presentation, Mary, on anything related to item 6 on our agenda, agriculture and conservation, zoning text discussion and approval?
We are complete.
Thank you. Thank you again. And so we'll move on to item 7, which is general public comment. Do we have any members of the public signed on tonight?
No, we do not. There are no members of the public that are participating this evening.
Well, with that, we'll move on to item 8, which is adjournment. Is there a motion that we adjourn?
I hate to do this to you guys. I've got a question before we adjourn. Can I do that?
Of course.
When we deny somebody's plan, like we did with that parcel on Liberty Road 26 out there by 26, out there by Century High School, and it to the BZA, is the BZA provided with, kind of a condensed reasoning of why we denied it? I mean, how does that work, Jim?
So it's heard de novo. So basically, the process is that the BZA is like the planning commission. They're in your shoes, so they're hearing it just as you heard it, and so it's not like an appeal of your decision. It's just a de novo hearing. So they're the new planning commission, so to speak.
They're starting new. Yeah, I get it.
That's
okay.
correct.
All right. I was just curious what the details are on where that. So thank you. I appreciate it.
And they're not even given the minutes or our discussion about what our concerns were, right? So really what we said and did is completely irrelevant. It accomplishes nothing.
That's correct.
But it's public record, and they could access the website and look at our discussion during that meeting or whatever. They could see.
I doubt that they do that, but
right.
And I'll say that meeting's next week. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's the 31st.
Yes, it's
Um,
the end of August.
Yeah,
Oh,
which is
man.
our next planning commission meeting. But Jim, correct me if I'm wrong. They would probably be instructed, I'm assuming, to not, as the Board of Zoning Appeals instructed, to not go look at past material.
I mean,
Even though it is public record, I would say they'd probably be instructed to not look at that.
that in practice, that's how it should be, but they're not going to be sequestered like a jury in the OJ trial. But yes, but as the process is, they're hearing it de novo, they're in the shoes of the planning commission, and that's sort of the legal standard they're following it by.
Right.
So they can't, I mean, they can look at your reasoning and opinions all they want, but they can't use that in their decision when they make it at the end of August on whether or not the plan should be approved or not.
Good. I appreciate it. I just wanted to understand the process. I'm sorry I slowed us down to get to the item 8. So, if you want me to make a motion to adjourn, Jeff, I'll get you there.
No, I'm glad you raised it actually, because it's so rare that we actually have denied a plan.
Yeah.
And honestly, when we work hard to go through and analyze and balance all these things out as a committee, and I think the fact that all of us, put our thoughts out there, it elevates the conversation. It seems, I certainly understand the legal standard of what de novo means, but it seems a shame because I think if I were the hearing examiner, I would at least benefit from knowing what the outcome of that conversation was. I might not agree with it, but at least I'd know it and understand it. Whereas here, they have to go in and figure it all out for themselves. And, maybe together we addressed 15 different issues and balanced them 10 different ways. He or she has to sit there by himself, and it's just harder, and it's, less likely they're going to cover all those same issues. So I wish that there was a way that they could at least be advised of our discussion and our concerns. They're not bound by it. They don't have to honor it. They're free to ignore it, but at least they know about it. And
Yeah.
It sounds like there's not a way that they can even know about it.
Right. And so, go ahead, Janice. I'm sorry.
I do believe that the public still has the opportunity to be there and to talk, correct, Jim? Yeah. So I have a
Correct.
feeling they will probably know.
Right. And, I guess my question is, after we did that, Linda, we were kind of back in that kitchen, and you reminded us that, we didn't have to just nuke it like we did and deny it. We could have said, look, fix this, and come back. What was the alternative? Can you explain that to us? Because again, I just want to make sure I understand the process. What was it you said we could have done there, Linda? Do you recall?
Well, it was the final subdivision approval. So normally the wish list of fixes that the planning commission can provide comes at the concept stage.
Yeah.
When it comes to final approval, it's sort of you approve it as is or deny it.
So those
I
are
guess-
our
That's
only
the
choices.
stage the commission acted in
Okay.
this stage.
Yeah. So the concept, I guess, is where we could have raised our concerns, although I think we did, but I guess we could have raised them more clearly. And made it clearer that if these concerns weren't met, we would be inclined to deny it. I thought we did that, but the fact of the matter is, I guess we didn't, or at least I didn't do it clearly enough. So we can do that, next time we're presented with a plan that has concerns at the concept stage, we can raise concerns to say, if these aren't remedied, we want to be clear, we'd be inclined to not approve the plan if it remains with these in place, I guess.
Right. All right. Thank you, Paul. Again, I made the meeting longer. I apologize.
It's all right, Pete. Being a troublemaker, we get it. You can redeem yourself by making a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn. And I'll second it, Dadgummit.
I think Matt seconded. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Good discussion. Thank you all again very, very much. Have a great evening.